Yippee-yay, there'll be nowhere.
Hi guys, and welcome to Dynavision 3, my latest release for Fallout New Vegas. Now, Dynavision 3 is a mod by My Good Eye, Mercurius, and myself. But it is actually a little bit more than that. It is a merging of several other mods, as well as an improvement on an existing mod. The existing mod, obviously, is Dynavision 2, and Dynavision 3 has been, well, quite dramatically improved. Due to having to make the script far more optimized for Skyrim because of the weakness in that scripting engine, I came up with some far more efficient ways of doing this, and I transported that code across to Fallout 3, and it made a huge difference. I have finally got round to transferring it to Fallout New Vegas, and the first thing I can tell you is the algorithm to detect distance and focus is now much faster, much smoother, and much more accurate. So in the past, when you looked at something, the focus, in Dynavision 2 anyway, the focus sometimes took a few tries there, and you'd see it stutter sometimes. If you were right on the edge of a focus point, it might come in and out of focus a little bit. None of that anymore. It's now almost instant. The effect is smooth, and it is very accurate. Once you look at something, it will stay in focus pretty much from then on until you move and look somewhere else. One other change that I made was for playability's sake. I made it so that when you look at something, it instantly focuses on it. As you can see in the distance, it focuses instantly. Dynavision 2 sometimes was sluggish at getting the focus in, and it made your eyes feel lazy and drunk. Whereas now, whenever you look at something, it instantly comes into focus, no matter what. The actual things that are out of focus, they blur much slower. Watch the background as I look at the sign. You'll see the background fades into the blur, whereas when I look at it, it snaps. This makes playing a lot easier while still having the depth of field effect. Now, the speed of the fade, you can still change. You can make that faster and faster so that almost seems to snap as well. But the focus is always pretty much instant. So whenever you're looking at something, you instantly focus on it. So it's more like the human eye and a little less like a slow camera, but you still get that sort of depth of field cinematic feeling. Before I show you all of the different settings for Dynavision 3's depth of field, I did mention it was a merger of some other mods. I have merged in the Imaginator, which was by MGE and Mercurius, and CINEMATECH, which was by myself and MGE, and the Director's Chair, which was another mod by me. And the Director's Chair merged all of those mods and gave you a user-friendly menu in MCM. I apologise for my character. He is thirsty and I cannot find water. I'm not running around looking for it. And so it makes a user-friendly menu for which you can change all of your visual settings, and I will show you that. Plus it gives you a heads-up display menu, which is actually a lot easier to use, and that's the first thing we're going to set up. I'm going to go along, press escape, and go to the mod configuration, Dynavision. The very first option here, if you just select Dynavision, is set HUD menu key. This is the first thing I would recommend doing. Click on that and press the new key. I'm going to pick F7. And now when I go back to my heads-up display, the game, and press F7, I get this nice menu here, this little menu giving me a lot of different settings, and I can use the arrow keys to go up and down. So here you go. Depth of field is currently set to the active depth of field. So as you can see when I look here, it focuses right on this. But if I want, I can change that to Horizon Clean. Now, Horizon Clean is simply a mod that adds depth of field to the horizon. Can you see the horizon is slightly blurred? That just makes the distant terrain look a little less blocky. So if you don't want the dynamic depth of field, but you do want the distant terrain to look a little blurred for either cinematic effect or to make up for the fact that the distant terrain is fairly low resolution, you can use that. Put it back on the dynamic depth of field, or you can change the Dynavision blur strength to medium and low. So there's low. In actual fact, I actually usually play it on low or medium. It's subtle enough so that you don't really get distracted by it, but it's at least a little softer. I'll put it back on high so we can see things. The focus speed, you can set this to a lot of different settings, including fastest. Now, with fastest, what will actually happen... Let me close the menu so I can get in a better position here. If I look down the road, if you watch the speed at which the blur comes in as I look at the sign, watch down the road as I look at the sign, you see the blur is pretty much instant. As I said, the focus is always instant. Your eye always focuses where it's looking, but the blur usually creeps in. But on the highest setting, it pretty much slams in. I use a medium setting on this usually. I like it to be a little sharper than the slow one, but that's a little too harsh for me. And I find if I'm setting it on medium and low... And there is one other setting for Dynavision, and that is soft focus. Now, soft focus is just a natural blur. If I set... I'm going to set it on the highest setting. Can you see everything's ever so slightly blurred? It's not completely out of focus. It's a soft blur. This is something you see in some ENBs where it blurs things a little bit. It makes edges a little nicer. It makes textures. If the textures are low quality, it hides it a little bit. I know some people use low soft focus, and that does help with, if you're using a low-end system and you don't have anti-aliasing, that can make it look a little nicer. I actually quite like the sharp one. Now, as I said, it actually brought in the Imaginator, and, for example, the Imaginator emitter, if I turn that on, you see the lighting change. Change it again. I'm just using the arrow keys to go through these, and you can pick whichever one you want. Completely up to you. And you also have these styles, the CINEMATECH styles, which just give you sort of a different colour scheme or a different feel. Ultra cool blue is kind of nice. If you like black and white. And so on. So you've got a lot of different settings there. These are just some presets. Believe it or not, you can tweak everything perfectly to your tastes, but these are some presets. There are some CINEMATECH styles. Now, these were styles that were more designed for the film grain effects, which I will show you. Blurry old film. This is actually a very cool setting. This is supposed to mimic what a trick they do where they smear Vaseline on camera lenses to give that slight smudged look. I like this one. This one always makes me feel I'm in a Western, especially if you use a film grain. And so on. So you can go through them and pick the one you want. Now, I talked about film grain, but you can see that the CINEMATECH film grain is not active. And there is a reason for that. Let me just close down this menu. If I go to the MCM menu, under Dynavision, you've got a lot of different options here. So if I go, here you go, Imaginator emitter. You can select your emitter setting here if you want. With the camera option, you can also select the styles. These are the Imaginator styles that I was showing you before. You can select them through the MCM menu if you would prefer that, if you don't like the heads-up display. Same with the CINEMATECH styles. But if you go down to film, this is the film grain effect. And as you can see, I've currently got medium subtle grain selected, but it's not showing. And the reason for that is under action, you can decide when things come on. Now, by default, Dynavision, that's the depth of field, is enabled in game, combat, and screenshot mode. I'll talk about screenshot mode in a little while. It's also enabled indoors. You can turn it off if you want. The film grain, on the other hand, is only selected for the menu mode. So as you can see, it's on in the menu, right? Which means you're seeing the subtle grain. If I actually change this to one of the heavy ones, Hollywood Heroes, you see the grain effect, the film effect, like crackled film. You can only see this in the menu by default. And that's just to allow you to get a feel for what it is you've selected. But if you want it on in the game, or in combat, or in screenshot mode, I'm going to set it for game and screenshot mode. You can do so. You can also do the same for depth of field. But those are the settings I'm going to pick right now. And then I'm going to get back out. Now, you can see I've got a film grain effect. Hollywood Heroes. This is a very, very heavy one. This uses a lot of special effects, and as you can see, you really do look like you're watching a movie. It works really well with the Cinematech style John Wayne's slow shutter to give you that Western look. Now that I've got that, let me turn this back off. Now that I've got that set up to be on in game, you remember I set it so that it was not on in combat. If I go up to this gentleman now and punch him, watch the film grain.
What was that?
You see it's disappeared because I'm in combat. I will put my fists away. He forgives me. And there you go. Film grain is back. So if you don't like these effects in combat, you can have them turn off. That also, because it does affect your performance a little bit. Not much, but it does affect it. If in combat you're finding your frame rate a little low, you can turn the film grain off. You can also, as I mentioned, turn off the depth of field for the exact same reason. Now I did tell you I would talk about the, where was it? Screenshot mode. Let me just turn off all of these for everything except for screenshot mode. Dynavision and Cinematech on screenshot mode. Now as you can see, no depth of field and no film grain. And I've got my heads-up display using a mod called One HUD, which is another mod that I've made. And if you are using One HUD alongside the Dynavision 3 mod, you get this function that responds to screenshot mode. Screenshot mode is simply where you hold the OHUD button, the activation button, and keep it pressed. And that turns the entire heads-up display off. But as you saw, the second the heads-up display disappeared, the film grain came back on. And so did the depth of field. This is not the same as just toggling the heads-up display on and off. If I toggle the heads-up display on and then off, you see no film grain, no depth of field. If I hold the key now for about 2 seconds, there you go. And I added that mode just for people who want to take screenshots or are just traveling around and like to have this kind of lovely special effects, but when they get to a place where they want to focus a little more, they can press the button and it all goes clear, no depth of field and no film grain. So you've got total control over how and when these effects are applied. Now if the Cinematech effect is active, when I press F7 I can now go along to the heads-up display menu and rotate through the different options and see which one I prefer. This one here is like an old computer monitor, and it looks really good if you use some like old crappy TV settings. It looks like you're looking at a really old TV. Subtle grain is the default one, and that gives the whole look a very slight soft look, like you're looking at this on a movie or on a TV, but not a bad quality one. Now you can fine-tune these effects far more from the MCM system. The film grain, for example, you can pick the primary effect, the secondary effect, and the special effect. Think of these as layers. For example, if I go to Hollywood Heroes, it has static. The opacity is a value between 0 and 255. If I change that to 255 and accept it, you can see the static is a lot more pronounced. I can also change it so it's black, and you will actually see the grain effect change. If I do the same for the secondary grain, which I've set up as 8mm film effect, you can begin to see it's becoming very, very messy. I'm going to put those back to a more normal level. In fact, I'm going to turn that one off. And then look at the worn film. If I set the opacity of that very high, you can really see it now. Really does look like an old movie. There is also an effect animation. The higher the number, the more it affects your performance. 120 frames means that there's less repetition. So this looks far more random. If you drop it all the way down to 30 frames, it still looks relatively good, but it's more repetitive and it's slightly more noticeable. And as you can see, it now doesn't have a preset. This is now a custom setting. Let me go to action and turn that off in menu mode now. And go along to the, let's have a look here, the lights section. Here is where you can begin to tweak things a lot more specifically. Brightness, saturation, contrast. So for example, if I take the saturation and really bump it up, I'm going to bump it up to 60. And then let's go and see what happens. Oh dear. Wow. I'm going to go out of screenshot mode so it stops the film grain. As you can see, my saturation is pretty high now. I would probably never play it like that. I can't imagine anyone doing that. But you can if you want. You can tweak it down a tiny bit. Let's put it at, say, 10 to give a little bit more colour. Let's add a tiny bit of contrast and see what that looks like. Oh, that's not actually too bad, is it? A little bit more colour, a little bit more contrast. And so on. And you can do the same with tints. So if you want to add a slight blue tint, I think this is between 0 and 25. Let's add about 12. We now have a blue tint. Here is the thing though, you don't have to change these from the menu. If you go along to your number pad and press the 0 key, you'll see this little menu appear. You've got to keep the 0 key pressed down. If I now press 7, you can see the contrast going up. If I press 4, the contrast goes down. And I can do the same if I press the 8. It takes brightness up. The 5, brightness down. If I press the 9, saturation goes up. If I keep my finger on it, it will just keep climbing and the colours will get more and more saturated. And 6 to go down. If I keep the 0 key pressed and I press the delete key, it resets everything to 0. You'll notice there's still a blue tint though. That is because I have not changed the blue tint. And if you press the plus key that is on your number pad, the tint will come up. You'll have to forgive me. Unfortunately, this key is also the key I use for my grenade hotkey, so I daren't release it now. But if I then press 7, it increases the green. If I press 8, it increases the red, 9, yellow, and so on. You press those keys, you'll be able to figure it out. If I keep the plus key pressed and the delete key and press, it resets everything back to 0. There we go, one grenade gone. Now, if, like me, you use that key for something else, you can change it, but not in the MCM menu, I am afraid. You can go along to console, you press the console key and do set DYNAVISION contrastor key to, say, 59, which is the N key. And now, there you go, N is doing it rather than the 0 key. I couldn't get that working in the menu because I have literally filled the menu script to the point where it cannot be increased. You can do the same for the tint or the tint key by changing DYNAVISION tint or key to 50. That will now give me M for the tint key, so it's no longer the same key as my grenade hotkey. I will put an entire list of the scan codes for different keys in the description page so you can check there. Installation is very easy. It does require either the Fallout Mod Manager or Nexus Mod Manager. You'll download it, activate with that, and click yes to all when prompted to overwrite. You should also be aware that when you use Unified HUD to merge all your heads-up display mods, this mod will appear as both CINEMATECH and the Director's Chair. It won't show up as Dynavision, it will show up as CINEMATECH and the Director's Chair because those were the two mods that affected the HUD before when they were merged in. I'm not changing that because it would have too many ramifications down the line. If you don't want to use Fallout Mod Manager or Nexus Mod Manager, Or you just don't want the new functionality, you just want the Dynavision functionality, the depth of field that was in Dynavision 2. There is another version called Dynavision 3 Lite. That is just the depth of field, nothing else. It has no MCM menu. It has no installer requirements. You can download that and copy that file to your data folder and activate it as you normally do. Obviously, I recommend the full version, even if all you want is the depth of field effect, because you can change everything in the menu. So you can turn off the film grain, you don't have to use the Imaginator, you can just use the depth of field, but you get the nice menu. And the MCM and the heads-up display menu are obviously a little easier than the Pip-Boy menu item. So I think that's about it. A quick recap. Dynavision's depth of field engine has been overhauled. You get better performance, better accuracy, smoother transitions. I've merged in the Imaginator's light changes, the CINEMATECH's film grain effects, and the director's chair control and menu system all into one mod. And that mod is called Dynavision 3. Be sure to check it out and give me some feedback on that page or underneath this video.
There'll be no wedding bells for today. 'Cause I got spurs that jingle jangle.